Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
Hey guys, before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by Denim. As a business owner myself, I personally know the importance of financial stability and preserving cash flow to help navigate through any freight market. With Denim's comprehensive service offering, you now have an all-in-one financial partner whose platform includes factoring, payments, freight audit, document collection management, and analytics, which help keep your business financially healthy and increase your team's time to focus on revenue-producing activities. You can also take advantage of Denim's free credit check, which they perform on all of your customers. And Denim will proactively reach out to you if they spot any signs of credit deterioration. Finally, Denim always pays your carriers first. As a broker, this is imperative to preserving your credit score in the market, which ultimately helps you become a broker of choice to your carrier partners. Are you ready to learn more? Visit denim.com to schedule a demo today. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you.
This episode is brought to you by SPI Logistics, the premier freight agent logistics firm in North America. For over 40 years, SPI has been diligently building the most successful freight agent network to provide first-class relationships for our shippers, receivers, and carrier partners. We are more than another transportation network. We are a dedicated team of professionals united by one singular purpose, and that is to expedite our agents' success. All of our agents are set up for success on day one, as they are provided with a full suite of support staff that is ready to assist them with everything from after-hours emergencies to financial and administrative needs on a no-fee basis. This way, you can focus on continuing to grow your business. There is no financial risk to start, and you have the ability to earn up to 75% in commissions. If you are looking to take control of your financial future and build your business with the backing of one of the most successful logistics firms in North America, visit www.spi3pl.com to learn more. Do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines, but most importantly, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. I'm going to save the rest of the intro because I got a very special guest that I'm going to bring up right now, and we're going to talk about a trending thing. It's not trending because it's kind of been around forever, but cargo theft is not slowing down. I think it's getting more and more intricate out there, and we're going to talk about that and how do you prepare yourself for it as an organization. So I have the founder of Zipline Logistics, Mr. Andrew Lynch, on the show. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. Super excited to be here.
No, I'm looking forward to it. And, you know, we we met literally all of 7 minutes ago, and I think we're going to have a really good conversation today about all of this. But before we get into cargo theft and everything, man, how did you get your start in freight? Like, what brought you in to, to found your company and everything?
So I fell ass backwards into freight, I think, as most of us did. I went to college for finance. I thought I was going to go to law school. I saw my student loan bill from my undergrad and realized I didn't want to go to graduate school of any kind. And I freaked out and moved to Chicago and got a job within about 7 days at C.H. Robinson Chicago Central. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or not on here.
Yeah, you can say whatever you
experience. Learned obviously an enormous amount from some of the best in the world there. That was in 2002, early 2002. I was there for about 6 years, and the inspiration for Zipline, was really little more than some of the feedback I was getting from carriers. I was a carrier sales guy there, and my co-founder, some of the feedback he was getting from customers, which, for us really boiled down to, the reality that there really was no specialization in logistics solutions providing back then, right? It was Allen Lund, it was Robinson, Command had come about, Coyote had launched, but there wasn't anyone out there really, trying to carve out a tight niche, outside of just sort of modal providers, right? There's LTL specialists, there was rail specialists, but we recognized that for me on the carrier sales side, I was a high performer. I had this great network of really high quality carriers that gave me outstanding service. I didn't have to track them every minute. and stay on them all the time to make sure they perform. They were just good, good quality providers that sold me their capacity at a good price, and that, folks internally at Robinson would work with me because they knew that I was a reliable provider of service. And my partner, from his, standpoint was like, hey, every time I put a shipment on the board that's going to like Walmart or Costco or something, somebody books it, and then I've got to call that rep and be like, hey, if you're an hour late, it's going to take 3 days to get you unloaded, and my customer's going to have a fine, and they're going to be pissed. And it was just like, hey, why don't we just, sort of refactor this whole thing through the lens of serving that, really large demographic, right? Consumer goods, products that end up on retail shelves. So, that was our inspiration, and we really stuck by that vision. 17 years later, we're still chasing it.
Dude, I love that. I'm, as a founder myself, I really enjoy hearing people's stories about kind of like what they got in, and, and then like, especially what they overcame early on. And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask that, man, like, what was one of those early challenges that you faced as a company that was kind of like that make or break moment, like your back was against the wall, the totality of starting your own business actually hit you, and you're like, we got to do this, and we got to do this now?
So there were two. One, I don't think I can actually probably go into detail on, or maybe it's just not right for me, but dealing with a really significant non-compete lawsuit from our former employer, which, when you're three guys trying to start off a business above a Chinese restaurant in Columbus, Ohio, and a $10 billion gorilla decides to come down on you, it's pretty tough. We made some really bold decisions during that process, and there's some of the things I'm the most proud of in my entire life. And I wish I could speak more publicly about them here. But beyond that, I mean, the timing, right? We opened our business in 2007. The Great Recession started, within months of us cracking open our doors. We were living off of savings. We had nothing but an SBA loan for $150,000 as our burn. And, it was, go start this business from scratch with no credit, right? Banks had stopped lending altogether. And, we had to really bootstrap it. I mean, by definition. And, what it created in us were some really good habits and really great discipline, right? So we couldn't grow too fast, right? We had to be really careful about how we grew, because our receivables financing was so limited and scarce that we had to be really careful. Hey, if you bring this customer on and the margin's really low, and we have to pay our carriers in 21 or 23 days in order to keep our credit rating going as a really small provider with very limited credit histories, we had to be really disciplined and intentional about what type of business we brought on, and what kinds of arrangements we made with carriers. And I mean, we had to do things like my co-founder's mom was a high school English teacher. We had to borrow like $100,000 from her pension because we were growing too fast. We brought on business that we couldn't pay our carriers fast enough. So a lot of those hurdles early taught us a lot of really valuable lessons about running your business, and about maybe flying too close to the sun, or being careful to learn not to fly too close to the sun early on.
Yeah, I think that there's so much out there, that nobody thinks about, because like everything's a perfect idea when it's in that infancy stage, right? Like when you first decide, like, I'm going to go out and do this, everything's perfect. You're going to be a millionaire probably within 2 weeks. You're going to be flying private. You're going to have luxury. Everything, all of your dreams are just going to be answered because you filed that LLC. And then reality sinks in, right? Because, for me, it was, because I delivered pizzas for the first 11 months that I was in business, because, I wasn't making any money. Like, I don't even think I broke even for 15 months in business, right? Because I had started right in 2020, so like it was very challenging at that time. But I also look at it now, kind of going back in it was like, well, damn, if I can turn revenue and survive these last 4 years in our economy and just the industry as a whole, I'm like, I think I'm not in the clear, but like my mentality is like, I'm very prepared for challenging situations, because, and I think that that's kind of what you saw. There were so many people who came into this industry in 2021, 2022, when the freight market was easy, and people were just setting everybody up from a customer standpoint, because they're like, we just need capacity. If you have a pulse, you're going to get access to our freight at that time.
Yep.
And now that's changed. And I think, to kind of tie in our topic of conversation today, that really exacerbated our biggest issue, one of the biggest issues in our industry right now, which is freight theft, where it was the Wild West there, man. And like, people didn't know who was getting loaded on what, double brokering, identity theft, fraud, all of that stuff is all tied into this here. And I think that where we are today is a kind of a direct reflection of what that market was a couple of years ago. And I'd love to get your opinion on this, because you guys you just gave a speech, or you put out an article here recently about this topic in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny. Preparing for this conversation, I grabbed our, our carrier qualification frameworks and sort of like how they've evolved over the years, and was thinking through this lens of I'm going to talk about what we do. And then I just realized well, that's super boring and probably relatively, table stakes. And I'm sure I could add a little bit of value to that conversation. But more than anything, to your point, this environment, I think that it should be really, really, really a focal point of the conversation, that the problem of freight fraud and theft really went exponential after that high pressure environment of COVID, right? Mm-hmm. And shippers themselves are not typically the victims of fraud and theft, right? I mean, shippers get victimized by the freight market in a lot of ways, right? But fraud and theft really aren't on the list.
Yeah.
It's really a broker problem. And when it comes down to why is this a broker problem, if you think back to those times of, mid 2020 through, kind of the end of 21, yeah, it was desperate times. It was hard to find capacity. The demand for freight services was, way outstripping the supply. But you also, as a broker, had an enormous amount of leeway on cost and on service, right? You didn't have to, sacrifice your qualification requirements in order to grab that truck, because at the end of the day, your customer's going to understand if you call them and say, hey, there are just no drivers for this thing, right? Yeah. Or your customer was going to call them and say, hey, I'm sorry, I know I told you I thought I was going to buy that truck for $1,500, but it's actually $1,900. There's little I can do, right? It's a pandemic. As that understanding, sort of dissipated, and the freight market, really kind of, fell through the floor, versus its supply network. Suddenly, everybody went back into this mode of commoditization. And I think if I had to, I like to try to, really get to the root of things a lot. It's just how my mindset tends to work. And when I think about the real problem comes down to the commoditization of freight service, right? And we do it to ourselves. Mostly we do it to ourselves as an industry. Mm-hmm. We don't allow ourselves to say no to business often enough that isn't buying on our value sets. And we don't allow ourselves to go to market with a focal point of our values and say, hey, look, I sell high quality service from high quality capacity providers. I don't try to water down their value proposition by driving their rates into the ground and, trying to make them, operate below their costs. And I sell that service to people that value really, really great communication and visibility and high quality service, right? And results. And, for us, that discipline that we created of running our business through the lens of efficiency and efficient use of capital, it really always kind of came down to, every time we stepped outside of that core value set, it stung. And I can tell you, I mean, we're going through it right now. Just like probably lots of other folks in the space, during COVID, we brought on some business that turned out to maybe not match our value set as much as we thought it would, right? These were folks that needed capacity then and were willing to, pay for great service and pay for great visibility. But when the market turned, they went back into commoditization mode. And we tried to make our, square peg fit in their round hole, and it just doesn't, right? And as a result, we lost money in order to try to, adhere to our value sets, or we had to, turn around and renegotiate or ask to give back business. And that's really difficult, right? It's a hard thing to swallow. And so, when I really look at what the root is and where it's happened to us, where we've been victimized, are those exact situations. It's a time of desperation that desperation, whenever you look at the, the daily freight market, supply and demand balances, anywhere where you see a massive, demand imbalance over supply, that's where you're going to see opportunities for fraud, right? It's just, it's predictable, it's obvious. And I think if you really, look closely, you can see what the root is.
Do you think we're still in a time where customers, shippers, manufacturers, however you want to label them, there are still trying to recoup their losses from 2020, 2021, and into 2022 from their transportation spend? So they are more open to seeing rates continue to drop? Or do you think that we've kind of passed that at this point, Andrew, where they're like, hey, listen, we know rates are about to increase. We want to kind of get ahead of the curve here. I mean, it's kind of the start of bid season. I know some people are throwing out their Q4 bids and then their 2025 bids and everything. And this isn't more of a what's the market going to perform question, as opposed to, do you think that the pulse out there is hey, we know freight was cheap, we can't continue down this route, though, because like service failures are inevitable when it comes into this, right? Because when we tie in fraud and cargo theft and everything, has that hit that level where they're like, all right, we got to stop? Because I think I forget the exact number, but I think it was Travelers Insurance released. It was like a couple 100% increase in freight theft in 2023 alone.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think just like, just the same way that we saw shipper behavior, be relatively across a broad spectrum on the decline in the marketplace. I think we're seeing this, at least from my perspective, we're seeing the same thing on the other side. I mean, we've got really, really, really savvy shipper clients in our network that are saying that exact thing. They're saying, look, we know we captured an awful lot of savings in the back half of 22 and 23. We know that, you're coming to us and telling us that we can rely on a, relatively stable marketplace for the next 12 months looking forward, with maybe a little bit of seasonal, bumpiness, or, perhaps we build in a couple 100 basis points of budget just to make sure that, the second half of 25 doesn't bring us a big surprise, but that are showing up with that reason that, hey, we came to, to capture savings when we knew it was there. We're not going to push for it because we know we really need to protect for service. But I mean, I can certainly tell you that we still have lots of those, bids that come through where it's going to be a 3-round bid, and they're going to choose the lowest cost provider on every lane, and you're going to get a target rate that comes back to you in round 2 that doesn't make any goddamn sense. And you've got to, I think the onus is on the broker. At the end of the day, shippers, honestly, large and small. I mean, we mostly serve the small and middle market from a consumer goods perspective, but we have some really, really large shippers, and some of them are the most values driven and most, kind of partnership focused customers that we have. But by and large, they're siloed, right? You've got a finance department that is saying, look, if I'm a consumer goods brand, my margin's getting beat up, right? Yeah. It's hurting. My costs are up. My cost for capital is up. And I need you to go find savings everywhere that you can. And the onus is on us to show them the difference between cost and value. And, really to be willing to say no when we know that, what it is that shipper is trying to buy doesn't match with what we as an organization sell.
Hey guys, before we go any further in this episode, I wanted to let you know it is brought to you by TIE Software, the battle station for freight brokers. Your TMS should be viewed as a tool to help you execute at a high level in any freight market. With TIE, brokers gain access to a comprehensive platform that has rate intelligence and quoting history converged down to a single screen. TIE also equips your team with all the data they need to confidently negotiate pricing, while also allowing them to communicate directly with both carriers and customers from a single command center. With most of your tasks automated through multiple integrations, your team can focus on making strategic decisions and not manual ones. Are you looking to revolutionize your brokerage by giving them a competitive advantage through automation? Visit www.tiesoftware.com/battlestation to learn more. Just do me a favor and let them know that the Freight Coach sent you. Do you think you bring up a really good point there, Andrew, where it's like, the cost to procure, to produce their product is up, right? Like no matter what mainstream media or anybody's saying, like cost of goods has increased exponentially, and they're trying. I think, if you think about it like a business owner, which I'm sure you do in most of these instances, you understand, because like they can't have that end price affect their consumer, right? Because otherwise people ultimately today look at, brand of cracker A and brand of crackers B, and they're like, hey, this one's 30 cents cheaper. Why not buy them, right? So like they're ultimately trying to find, how can we extract savings in our operation to not have it affect our end consumer? Because again, and then if you bring the scope out just a little bit further, you look at credit card debt, it's at an all-time high. Delinquencies are at an all-time high right now in the United States. So if you look at some of those macro factors, all of that is tied into that decision-making thing. But then again, does that breed that ultimate mentality of desperate times call for desperate measures? And then this is where you see freight theft increase out there, because people are like, hey, I'm going to steal this truckload of whatever because the street value is so high. I can go sell this for $2 a box on the street, and stuff like that. So like, are we creating that environment as the economy is operating the way that it is right now?
We're absolutely creating that environment, and again, it's brokers, and I, look, shippers aren't to blame, but they're a part of it, right? I mean, you see, a lot of like mega shippers say things like, hey, I'm not a price maker, I'm a price taker, right? I don't set the market, and that is true. But if you control $100 million spend and you run a multi-round bid with 150 brokers, and then you have a routing guide, but you have, an expectation of 98% first tender acceptance, like you are creating that environment of desperation where folks are bidding, hyper aggressively in order to win your freight. And then when it comes through and there are little bumps in the road, they've got to make a decision between profitability and service. And that's just not a place where our industry should be. And it's like the standard right now. I mean, I feel like everywhere I'm looking, it's just someone having to make the choice between making a profit and delivering on a promise. And so, I think there are a lot of parties that can work this out together. But I do think that the onus does start with the 3PL industry, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who say yes or no to business. So we are actually the market makers at the end of the day. And I think, really interesting to your point on, sort of everyone's level of desperation right now. I've tried to walk this through with some shippers when I talk about what next year looks like, because I think it's being a little bit overlooked that, everyone is desperate. When I talk to my team, we were joking earlier about like freight, sonar and freight markets and looking at all of these, tender rejection indexes. And look, the fact is all that stuff is important. Those are all leading indicators. What they're leading indicators of is behavior. And what you sell against in this industry is competitive behavior, right? If I'm selling you a value set that says that I'm going to deliver you service at all costs, or I'm going to deliver you, retail performance at all costs, that my pricing isn't going to be the same as the person that says I'm going to deliver you 18% savings on your freight spend, right? It's just two different things, right? Everyone is so desperate, trucking companies included, that when this market does start to turn in earnest, and I don't think that we're close to that at all, unfortunately, from a capacity balance perspective, but that when that opportunity comes, trucking companies have an obligation to chase money. Like, there are no relationships that someone will sacrifice their organization's health over. At least I hope not, right? Because that's a poorly run organization. The fact is that almost every trucking company in this country, outside of maybe the mega 4 or 5, is operating on such thin margins or negative margins that the moment they see the opportunity to operate in the black, they have got to do whatever it takes to get there. And that is what I think is going to cause the greatest disruption over the course of the next 18 months. Is just, I think that it's going to take a long time to get to that point, but when it gets there, it may be much less of a trickle and much more of a flood.
Yeah, I think that, I've been saying this a lot here recently. I think 2025 is going to be very similar to 2024. I don't see, outside of a black swan event, Andrew, I don't think anything's changing. I think most people should kind of strap in as this being the normal market here, for the foreseeable future. I think that when certain markets like this start to materialize and and then they continue like this, it does go down to the best value proposition that comes out there. And if your value proposition is we can do it for cheaper than everybody else, you're going to attract, I think, the wrong kind of business. You're going to attract what's busy over what's actually worth your time, right? Because there is an ROI on your efforts. And it's easy if you just want to cold call people and get onto the distribution list methodology, right? Like, oh, then you spend all your day quoting, but you're not actually winning any business. You're not actually growing. You're not paying for your seat. And I think that is where because I personally think that the exodus in the industry is going to come from the brokerage side, because I think a lot of people, again, if you look at back to what we were talking about, receivables and credit card debt being at an all-time high, I think that there's a lot of businesses that are built on one or two key accounts. And what is that financial health of that organization looking like? Are there risks? Because dude, I pay attention to this stuff, man. Receivables are aging big time out there, and they're large sums of money. And that's what pays for people's P&Ls throughout the year. And then again, I think that also breeds into desperate times where they're looking, they're like, all right, how do we get this? And then lines of credit from banks are going to get rescinded and cut in half and everything else. It's going to come down to survival of the fittest. And I think that this breeds where we're kind of at as a whole. I think desperate times are really out there for a lot of businesses. This just as well as anybody. This isn't easy. Nothing about running a business is easy. And you have to go out there and think about that as you're kind of, really working in this market and in this environment, because I think a lot of individuals out there need to be prepared. This could very well go on for 2025 and 2026. Nobody knows.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a post on LinkedIn recently that was just like, hey, what if this is the new normal, right?
Yeah.
What if there is no massive market shift coming? And I think that's a really good mindset to have. I mean, look, we've all been in this business long enough to know that the cycles are natural. The industry is far too fragmented and diverse, for it to not be a cyclical, kind of boom and bust industry. But the reality is that your mindset should be that this could be years, right? And you've got to operate your business through that reality. And listen, I made the mistake right during 2023 of really holding firm to, hey, this market's going to turn around and I've just got to wait it out, and I've got to keep the wheels on the bus until this thing comes back. But eventually the reality's got to set in, and you've got to reset to your core values and go back to the folks that buy what you sell, and just focus on delivering on those fundamentals. And if that means that you're only $100 million business instead of a $200 million business, well, that's okay, because it means you're still going to be here in 2026 when the market does finally turn.
Yeah, I'm more looking in our business. I'm more looking about the, kind of improving. I'm always looking at kind of improving our balance sheets, right? Where can we, I like what you said about not growing too fast. And that is something that, my business partner and I actually just discussed is it's yeah, we could sit here and say hey, in 2025, we want to be at $20 million. Is that realistic? Is that feasible? Can we actually do that the right way? Because, we're bootstrapping this as well, man. So it's not like this is we have an influx of, 20 million in VC capital just to hire a bunch of people and do all of that. We don't, right? So it's what's sustainable for us to continue to grow? Because, hiring people and adding headcount is, we got to understand, are we going to bring on an account that is going to require us to hire 5 people, but we don't have the funding to actually hire those said 5 people? And is that detrimental to our business and stuff like that? So, I think that there's a lot of things that people need to be kind of aware of. And I know we wanted to talk, more about cargo theft and everything, but I think that it's a great kind of conversation as a whole for people to really look at what they're going after here and how are they going to prepare themselves in the event that nothing does change. Because I think, my honest opinion on cargo theft, Andrew, is it's not going anywhere. It's and here's my thing. I know this might hurt some people's feelings, but you guys, criminals don't care about the law. Just in FYI, they're going to do what they're going to do no matter what. They're going to get more and more crafty in how they do things. But again, you as an organization, if you refuse to breed that behavior inside of your company, right? And then especially, I think the most telltale thing is, and is this going to prevent it? Absolutely not entirely. But if you actually have a carrier selection process that you follow, and because here's the thing. They're looking for easy. All right. They're looking for easy. Who's the person who does not care about their job? I'm going to accept their load no matter what. But if you push back, if you know your details of your shipment, if you start questioning the carrier a little bit, like, hey, what's this going on? Is this going on? Is this going on? You're going to naturally deter a lot of that, because a lot of fraud, they're looking for the quick buck, and that's really it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I'll add to that. I mean, we what I would say is that, even before COVID and even before this time, being someone who specialized in retail, who specialized in an awful lot of high value shipments, we had what we would have considered an airtight carrier qualification process, right? And to the extent that some of our largest, retail clients made our qualification process the standard across their entire networks.
Love it.
And, what still happened to us with our theft that was in that article, it happened one time, and thankful that it didn't become a bigger problem for us, but it's desperation, right? And so what I would say is that, like, taking a load for too cheap in a hot outbound market when your business is struggling to maintain profitability or to pay its bills is the equivalent of finding yourself, walking through Central Park at 3:00 in the morning, right? You've got to look at, how did I get here? What decisions did I make to put myself in this position? And just absolutely do not set yourself up from a sales and operations perspective to be in a position of desperation where not covering a shipment will cause you to make a decision that could cost your business, it's survival at the end of the day. I mean, these claims can be enormous. Ours certainly was.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, man, is I personally think freight brokers out there need to start looking, because I know it's not required by law to have insurance and cargo insurance, but like, I also think a lot of people need to understand, if you want to move real freight out there, every single shipper requires you as a broker to have that, at least the ones that I've come in contact with. So, because it's like, and then also understanding your insurance policy. And dude, we could have an entire other conversation about that, and the insurance that you have and how much freight. I would love to know this, Andrew, how much freight is actually being hauled out there that is actually on the carrier's exclusion list, but they never actually found out that it was on their exclusion list, and they're doing that right. I think it's a lot higher than people think, and same with brokers too.
I absolutely guarantee you it is much higher than anybody thinks, and you're right. That's a great kind of checkpoint for everyone to go back off of here and take a look at, like, what are my policies, and to the extent that I'm hauling something that might be on an exclusion list, how does it match up with my carrier database?
No, I agree. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me. We like to keep these shows kind of right at that 30-minute mark, because everybody who watches and listens has a day job and they got to get back after it here, man. But how does anybody reach out to you or Zipline to find out more? If you guys are hiring or anything like that, put that all out there, man.
Our LinkedIn page is probably the best way to get in touch regarding hiring. And then, just info@ziplinelogistics.com. Reach out anytime.
Perfect. I appreciate it, man. And thank you so much for joining me, Andrew. And as always, if you guys got value in what you heard today, which I know you guys did, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you see value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.